Hey, it's Sunday evening. Here we are on 1 Samuel chapter 17. 58 verses, but it moves fast. One of the favorite chapters of the Bible for most people, the story of David and Goliath. As we've seen all through Samuel, the Philistine army and the Israelite army, they're fighting back and forth all over the place, and it's a perpetual, long-time war. Saul's king. We know David's going to be king already, but he's not there yet. He's still just a boy. But God's done revealed that he will be the second king of Israel. And all this stuff is happening over 1,000 years before Christ. Remember that. So continue with the battle. Verse 1, chapter 17. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle. And then it just says where they were at. These areas at Shoko, which belongs to Judah, pitched between Shoko, Azekah, if it's Damon. I don't know where those towns were. Yeah, but the point is, that's a specific place. They were gathered together at battle, and Israel was gathered over here on the other side, getting ready for this. Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they pitched by the valley of Elah and setting the battle in array against the Philistines. So they're getting ready to fight. Got two fronts here. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side. There was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath. That city's still there in Palestine, by the way. Whose height was 6 cubits and a span. I think that would total up to be about his 9 feet 9 inches tall. Would have been great to have him on your basketball team, wouldn't it? And he had a helmet of brass upon his head. He was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. He had over 150 pounds of armor. You say, how could he carry that? He was 9 feet 9 inches tall. He was a big dude. And he had other armor. He had greaves of brass upon his legs and something kind of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, really big. He had a big spear. And his spear's head weight, 600 shekels of iron, big heavy spear on the end of that shaft. And one bearing a shield went before him. That's custom. People had an armor bearer going before him back in these Old Testament battles. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel and said unto them, why are you come out to set your battle in array? This is old Goliath now. He's shouting and taunting them over there. Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you and let him come down to me. Now, I've read that we have other texts outside of the Bible that says this is oftentimes the way battles would be fought in the ancient Near East, that they'd get maybe thousands of people on both sides, but then they'd send a representative out like this and said, your guy come and fight our guy and we'll settle this, which is really kind of smart. I guess instead of thousands dying, we'll figure whoever our champion remains will be that you'll be the servants to the other one. And it's also kind of a portrayal of what Christ did for us. He's our champion that went before us and won the battle for us. Verse 9, send somebody out to fight me, Goliath said. If he's able to fight with me and kill me, then we'll be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you'll be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, this is Goliath the Philistine, he said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. They were quaking in their sandals. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. He had 8 sons. The old man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. By this time in Jesse's life, he was an old man. He had 8 boys. And the eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. So Jesse's oldest 3 boys were in the army. And the names of those 3 sons that went to battle were Eliab, the firstborn, the next Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David, he was the youngest. And the 3 eldest, they followed Saul, went off in the military. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. He's still just a boy. He's just watching over the sheep at home. And the Philistines drew near morning and evening, and they presented him 40 days. We just ran across this in Matthew chapter 4 last Wednesday night. Remember, when you run across that word 40 in the Bible, it usually means a time of testing. Noah's flood, Jesus fasting in the wilderness for 40 days, and that's all through the Bible. Here we are, the Goliath gone out 40 days, and he walks out front and makes fun of God's army. And they're scared of him, so they won't go out and fight. And it's for 40 days this has been going on. He'll walk out there and call them a bunch of chickens or something. And Jesse said to David his son, "Take now for your brothers an ephah of this parched corn, these 10 loaves, and run to the camp of your brethren and carry these 10 cheeses." Jesse said the army was financed by the citizenry. So people would send out stuff to feed the army. And here's Jesse said, "I got 3 boys in the military. David, you take 10 loaves of bread and some cheese so they can eat cheese sandwiches out there, and take them a little corn too. You can leave them sheep long enough, go take them their lunch. Run to the camp of your brethren. Carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000, and look how the brethren fare, and take their pledge." Or Jesse says, "Now you find out how the battle's going, and you come back and tell me." And Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning. Bet he had a night's sleep, didn't he? Thinking, "I'll get to go see the battle tomorrow. I don't have to go just be shepherd. I'm going to go see what's going on." So he was excited. Got up early in the morning and left the sheep with the keeper. "Watch them till I get back." And he took and went, and Jesse had commanded him, and he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. He got there just as it's getting ready again. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage. Said, you stay here with the wagon. I'm going to go see what's going on. And he ran into the army, and he came and saluted or greeted his brethren. Verse 23. And as he's talking with his brothers, they're probably telling him, "You wouldn't believe we've been out here 40 days, and that old giant comes out and he makes fun of us every day." As he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words. And this time David heard him making fun of them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, they fled, and they went and got in their places. They went running because they were sore afraid. Now remember, the Bible says over in the New Testament for you Christians, over in 1 Peter, says you resist the devil and he'll flee from you. You're not supposed to flee from him. And the men of Israel said, "Have you seen this man that's come up? Surely to defy Israel he comes up. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter," that would be old Michael, "and make his father's house free in Israel." Anybody can whoop that. All the soldiers was talking about. Anybody go out and fight that giant and win, the king will make him rich and let him marry his daughter. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, "What shall be done to the man that kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" And so David said, "Tell me that again, because I'm going to go take care of this." And the people answered him after this manner, said, "So shall it be done to the man that kills him." And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake to the men, and Eliab got mad. His anger was kindled against David, and he said, "Why camest thou down hither? Why'd you come? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride, and I know your naughtiness of your heart. You're come down that you might see the battles. All you're here for, little brother." And David said, "What have I now done? Is there not a cause?" And he turned from him toward another and spake after the same manner. He ignored his brother and started telling somebody else. Said, "What's that king going to do, the man that whoops that giant?" And the people answered him again after the former manner. He wanted to get it exact, right? And when the words were heard which David spake, they went and told old King Saul. There's a little old cocky boy down here thinks he's going to go out and fight that giant. They rehearsed him before Saul, and he sent for him. King Saul sent for David. David said to Saul, verse 32, "Let no man's heart fail because of him." Don't be scared of him. "Thy servant will go and fight with that Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you're but a youth." New Testament, Paul told Timothy, he said, "Let no man despise thy youth." And that man Saul said, but you're just a boy, and said, that man is a man of war since the days of his youth. David said to Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and they took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and I smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. I killed that lion, I took that lamb right back out of his mouth, and when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and I slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them. He'll be dead like the lion and the bear, seeing he's defied the armies of the living God. David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, he'll deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. Now there's a principle here. If you want to have confidence in what God can do for you today, remember what God did for you in the past. And Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with thee. I bet old Saul was shaking. He said, well, go ahead. Lord bless you. And Saul armed David with his armor. He said, here, wear my stuff. You can wear my armor. Saul said, here, put on my armor. And he put a helmet of brass upon his head. He armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor. And he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. He never wore it before. It's too heavy for him. And David said to Saul, I can't go with these, for I've not proved. I don't even know how to walk in these things. And David put him back off. And David took his staff in his hand. He is familiar with that. And he chose him 5 stones out of the brook, 5 smooth stones. He went down to the branch. Sometimes people say, well, you're going to find out here in a minute. David didn't need but one of them stones. Did he lack trust in God? Why'd he get 5 of them? But you know, if you read on over, I believe it's in Chronicles, you'll find out that Goliath had 4 brothers. I think old David knew he was going to kill Goliath with one. He thought his brothers might come out and have to deal with them too. So he took 5 smooth stones out of the brook. Or there might be that principle too. It's better to have it not need it than to need it not have it. He took 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in the shepherd's bag, which he had, even in his scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistines. Now this is not one of them flips, it's one of them slings. When you turn one side loose and throw a big baseball-sized rock and let it go. David was used to that. That's what he'd been using in the field where he was watching the sheep and stuff. He'd probably killed, I don't know, rabbits and all kinds of stuff, made lunch with this thing. Maybe he'd shot some squirrels out of the tree with me. He was good with it, but he took what he knew and God blessed it. He knew not to try something he had never tried before, Saul's armor and sword. So the Philistines came and drew near to David. The man that bare the shield went before him. So here comes Goliath, and here comes Goliath's armor bearer. And David's going to go out and meet him. When the Philistines looked about and they saw David, he disdained him. Old Goliath started making fun of David then, because he said, because he was but a youth and ruddy and fair, kind of little old red-headed boy going to come out here and fight me with a sling? And the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you comest to me with sticks? He had his spear too, right? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I'll give your flesh to the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. The buzzards are going to be eating you here in a little while, and the coyotes will get you tonight. Then said David to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into my hand, and I'll smite thee. I'm going to kill you and take your head. I'm going to cut your head off, Goliath. And I'll give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day to the fowls of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Because David knew that I'm going to do what I can, but this battle is the Lord's. And all the assembly shall know that the Lord saves not with a sword and a spear, for the battle's the Lord's, and he'll give it into your hands. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hasted and ran. He went to running off toward him, and I can see him now. He's running. He's done took that stone out of little old sack with, he's got the other 4 in there and puts it in his sling, and he's just as he's on the run, and he's running as hard as he can toward that old Philistine giant. He hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Verse 49, and David put his hand in the bag, he took thence a stone, and he slang it. And he smote the Philistine in his forehead. That means that rock hit him right here, right between the eyes. That the stone sunk into his forehead. It went plumb through his skull into his brain. And he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and he smote the Philistine, and he slew him. And there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and he took the giant's sword, he took his sword, and he drew it out of the sheath there. I bet it's heavy to pick up for him, don't you? But he cut off that giant's head with it. Cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Resist the devil, he'll flee from you. And the men of Israel of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines until they come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to these places, Shaaraim and to Gath and to Ekron. Those 2 cities are still on the evening news, aren't they? Gath and Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. When the Philistines ran, Israel took off after. All at once they had courage after David's killed the Goliath. And so they're all chasing them, and they're dropping them along the way. And they chased them all the way back to their own cities. And then they went back along the way and took all the stuff out of their tents that they left and kept it for themselves. They spoiled their tents. And David, he took a trophy too. He took the head of that Philistine, the big old head, he's carrying it around. And he carried it all the way to Jerusalem. At this time, Jerusalem didn't yet belong to Israel. David's going to later be king there, but he took it all the way to the gates of Jerusalem, probably as a symbol to what he intends for the enemy in there. And he kept the armor and put it in his own tent. He kept that trophy of the Goliath's armor. And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistines, he said to Abner, remember we met him before, he's the general of the Israelite army, the captain of the host. Saul said, Abner, whose son is that youth? And Abner said, who is that boy who went out there and did that? And Abner said, as thy soul liveth, king, I don't know, I can't tell. And the king said, well, find out, inquire thou whose son that stripling is. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul. He's still carrying the head of the giant in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are they? Now, Saul had already seen this family once before, but he said, who are you? He didn't pay much attention to Jesse's youngest boy there. Whose son are you, young man? And David answered and said, I'm the son of thy servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. All right, we'll pick up there next week.